how do we educate people from other places when the effects of colonization are so deep that the global conversation about racism, because we always have this conversation like it's exclusive to America, but when we know that anti-blackness exists all over the world, and it is all the results of the white supremacy and the colonization that we are still feeling today. So how do we create those inroads? Because I know a lot of Dominicans who did march, who were out there marching, right? And I do have friends who are educators who were arrested for Black Lives Matter, and they were marching for themselves just as much as they were marching for Black Americans because they know that they're Black. And the media never focuses on them. The media goes straight to Dykeman over a incident about drug dealers and makes it a racial issue, and then MAGA jumps on it, right? You know what I'm saying? And they did it in Chicago too. But there are a lot of people who are Latinos who understand their Blackness, have always understood it, and you never hear about them. But how do we have this conversation about the global aspect of this? Because we've broken ourselves up into so many groups that to me it's like it's like Game of Thrones. We all got to get together to defeat the Lannisters.
So I don't disagree with you on that. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, it is a thing that requires us to move and work and think and act as a collective as often as possible. You know, as I said before, I don't know that it's always possible in the ways that we think. I think one of the things that we have to do in terms of our engagement in the political process and civic engagement in America is that we have to get away from the binary way of thinking that we have adopted, right? We have become so polarized, and that has caused us to think in a very binary way that does not reflect any degree of nuance or any degree of intelligence. The problem with that is where we sort of position ourselves is, if I don't agree with you on 10 out of 10 things, or you don't agree with me on 10 out of 10 things, I can't fuck with you. I can't rock with you because you don't agree with me on everything. I don't agree with anybody on 10 out of 10 things, right? So from a political ideology standpoint, we have to stop focusing on those areas that we don't disagree with and figure out how do we maximize the areas where we can disagree. Where we can agree and we can find common ground. The other thing is, and there are two more points I want to make in response to your question. The first one is, we have to have the courage to give voice around anti-Blackness globally when we see it. Mm-hmm. That sounds a lot easier than it is. Right. And the reason why I say that is, once you become sort of aware of the depths of anti-Blackness and what it means, you start to see it damn near everywhere. And you also start to see it in things and traditions and places and culture and traditions that you actually may like or have been associated with or identify with as harmless, right? So when you're at home with abuela or abuelo or tia and tio, and you all start talking and they start saying things that speak to like colorism, for example, you're like, oh shit. So now I'm with my niece, and she's hearing my grandmother talk about this in a way that I grew up hearing or witnessing or observing, in whether it was in my household or whether it was in my neighbor's household or what have you, that seemed harmless, but is also contributing to this sense of anti-Blackness. I now have a choice. Am I gonna like say something to my grandmother about this? Or am I gonna pull my niece aside and say, yo, listen, I know that this happened and so on and so forth. But you know, the reality is that way of thinking is actually problematic, and here's why I'm going to have that conversation with you that I may not have with abuela, but I'm having with you, because you need to understand going forward why that is a problem. That takes a lot of courage, because there are a lot of traditions that we're very comfortable in and very comfortable with that are anti-Black that we don't even realize, right? And if we don't have the courage in order to do that, then we're going to fail. The last thing that I want to say on the piece about like, how do we, you know, educate and give voice to that is, politically speaking, right? Black people, I'm not even going to bare bones about this. Black people are tired. And what I mean by that is like folks who are non-ADOS, and I think that there is a valid ideology behind ADOS, but I want to be clear. I'm not here carrying the ADOS flag like as a representative. I'm just simply talking about ADOS as a specific group. But Black people who are ADOS are tired. And so what I mean by that is this is very uncomfortable to have a conversation about, but we have to have a conversation about because it is necessary and it's honest.
That's why I want to hear.
Yeah, no doubt. We don't have the energy to try to convince your ass, your Dominican ass, that your Puerto Rican ass. We don't have the energy to try to convince you that you Black and fight our oppressor at the same time. Right. We don't, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have the energy to do that at the same time. Like, either you gonna fuck with us and we can fuck with each other together and we can fight this oppressor together, or we just gotta go fight the oppressor and worry about that other shit on the back end. But we can't continue to do both. What does that mean? It means that, quite frankly, members of other communities, and I'm not just identifying the Latino, Latinx community, I'm talking about Caribbeans that are Black, you know, from Haiti, from, you know, the West Indies. I'm talking about them as well. I'm talking about people from Africa who have immigrated to America. I'm talking about them as well, right? Like, we don't need to fight you about getting on the table with us because we've been here. Not saying that you all haven't, but saying that our fight right now has to be concentrated on dealing with our oppressor and systemic inequity and dealing with that, because that takes a whole lot of energy each and every day. Right. So unless folks are really willing to step up, like we out of benefit of the doubts. Like people say they be out of fucks. We out of benefit of the doubts. It's like you got to show, like, on a certain level, we really understand and we want to be here, and we're with the alliances, not just performatively, but actively, because we don't have the energy to pull folks along while we're trying to push white supremacy away.
And I agree with you, but I also think that speaking about Black people and as if they're a monolith is also problematic, because the truth is that a lot of Black people who are American who ain't rocking with ADOS and are like, nah, I don't feel that way about you, or I don't feel this way. And there are people, and so just like that exists within the Black community, it also exists amongst Latinos, Latinx people.